Everything digital. From the smooth 4K video on your screen to the stock trade executed halfway across the globe is governed by a singular, constant, almost philosophical struggle. It's a drama that unfolds billions of times every second. A hidden war not fought with bullets, but with the ruthless physics of distance and the immutable currency of time. This is the complete story of the CPU cache, the unsung hero, the master logistician, the silent savior that prevents our digital world from grinding to a halt. Imagine a champion sprinter, a world record holder who can cross 100 meters in under 10 seconds. This sprinter, let's call him the CPU, is a miracle of modern engineering, capable of executing a billion complex instructions per second, a pace we measure in gigahertz. He is the ultimate engine of calculation, a relentless, focused force designed for pure, unadulterated speed. Now imagine this sprinter is not running a clean track, but a marathon through a vast, unfamiliar city. Every few steps, every few calculations, he needs a crucial piece of information, a data point, an instruction for the next step. Where does he find it? In the vast, dusty, and infinitely sprawling metropolitan area we call main memory, or DRAM. This is where the paradox strikes. While our CPU sprinter can execute an instruction in a single cycle, a nanosecond or less, fetching the required data from the main DRAM memory takes an eternity, hundreds of these precious cycles. To the CPU, 100 cycles of waiting is not just a delay, it is a catastrophe. It's the difference between executing a billion operations per second and sitting idle, tapping its foot, burning power, and accomplishing nothing. The vast speed of the processor, its core genius, becomes its greatest vulnerability. It is forced to stop its flawless billion-step-per-second routine to send an SOS across the digital landscape, cross a chasm of electrical resistance, and wait for the response to meander back. We've designed the world's most powerful mind, yet its performance is shackled by the sloth of its own library. We've built a Formula One car but insist it stop for gas every 100 feet. This fundamental mismatch between the CPU's blazing execution speed and the main memory's painful access latency is the central crisis of computer architecture. It's the bottleneck that defines the modern digital experience. Every stutter, every micro delay, every momentary lag you have ever experienced is, at its heart, a ghost of this waiting game. The core challenge is simple. How do you feed a hyperspeed mind with the data it needs, at the speed it demands? The answer to the great bottleneck isn't to make the sprinter slower or the main library faster. Both are physically and economically prohibitive. The solution is the ingenious introduction of a high-speed middleman, cache memory. If main memory is the vast, distant archive built from inexpensive, power-efficient, but sluggish DRAM, then cache memory is the ultra-exclusive, on-chip penthouse suite. It is constructed from a completely different material, RAM, static random access memory. Unlike DRAM, which constantly needs refreshing to hold its charge, and thus suffers high latency, RAM holds its data stable as long as power is applied. This stability translates directly into staggering speed, often achieving single-cycle access times. Think of the CPU as a master chef running a Michelin star kitchen. The main pantry, the DRAM, is across the street full of ingredients, but a time-consuming trek away. The chef cannot afford to cross the street for every pinch of salt or every slice of mushroom. The solution? The kitchen staff installs a small, highly polished jewel box of essential ingredients directly next to the chef's cutting board. This is the cache. This cache is incredibly expensive. DRAM cells are complex and require far more transistors than DRAM cells, making them physically larger and costlier to manufacture. Therefore, its size is severely limited. But what it lacks in volume, it makes up for in its intelligence and proximity. The cache's genius lies in its mission, to hold only the most frequently used data and instructions. It is a device of pure anticipation. It lives by two cardinal rules of computation. If you used it a moment ago, you'll probably use it again, temporal locality. If you use this piece of data, you'll probably need the pieces right next to it, spatial locality. By keeping the CPU senses essential ingredients within arm's reach, literally microns away from the core, the cache transforms the hundreds of cycles wait into a near-zero cycle instant access. It becomes the ultimate buffer, an on-demand, high-speed dispensary that ensures the CPU sprinter, now armed with its essential information, never has to break stride. This single design choice, sacrificing volume for velocity, is the fundamental magic that allows a modern, processor to realize its full terrifying potential. Without it, your powerful 8-core CPU would perform like an early 1990s machine. If the problem is a gap between the CPU's speed and DRAM's latency, and the solution is a fast SRAM buffer, the challenge quickly becomes, how many buffers do we need, and how should they be organized? The answer is the concept that truly defines modern computing architecture: the cache hierarchy. We cannot build a single cache large enough to replace main memory. It would be prohibitively expensive, massive, and paradoxically, its sheer size would slow down the time it takes to search it. Instead, we organize our caches into layers, a tiered system that perfectly balances the competing demands of speed, size, and proximity. Imagine the process of seeking knowledge within a highly optimized military command center or a medieval castle. Layer 1, the pouch. Extremely small, ultra-fast, placed literally on the king's CPU cores, person. Instant access, but only holds a few tokens. Layer 2, the desk drawer. Larger, slightly slower, still within the private office, holding the working documents for the day. Layer 3, the shared archive. Much larger, accessible by all commanders in the wing. Slower than the first two, but still lightning fast compared to the outside world. This layered structure creates an elegant funnel. Higher levels, L1, L2, are small, lightning fast, and situated closest to the processing core. They exist to satisfy the CPU's most immediate insatiable hunger. Access is measured in single clock cycles. Deeper levels, L3, L4, are significantly larger, slower, though still exponentially faster than DRAM, and strategically placed to handle the bulk of data that just missed the higher levels. Access is measured in tens of clock cycles. The hierarchy's genius lies in its statistical mastery. By ensuring that the most critical, most frequently accessed data sits at the highest, fastest levels, the system's overall efficiency is dictated by its highest hit rate. If L1 and L2 can satisfy 95% or more of all data requests, the CPU only has to endure the 100-cycle DRAM wait in the remaining 5% of cases. The journey through the cache is a desperate search for the highest tier answer. Each layer serves as a defensive wall, a logistical checkpoint designed to prevent the request from ever needing to traverse the slow, power-hungry chasm to main memory. This architecture ensures the CPU rarely has to break its stride, transforming a waiting bottleneck into a near-instantaneous pipeline. This is the foundational structure that allows a tiny chip to process petabytes of data at unbelievable speeds. If the cache hierarchy is a tiered command center, then the level 1 cache, L1, is the king's inner sanctum, the most privileged, fiercely guarded, and impossibly fast memory on the entire chip. L1 cache is where the processor's lightning-fast routine meets the reality of data access. Its defining characteristics are its tiny size and its single-cycle latency. Accessing L1 is so fast that it is practically simultaneous with the instruction execution itself. It's the CPU's immediate short-term memory, constantly refreshed with the data it needs right now. Crucially, L1 is typically split into two distinct, specialized sections. L1 instruction cache, L1I. This holds the actual commands, the recipe steps the CPU must execute. By separating instructions, the CPU can be reading the next instruction, fetching the what to do at the exact same moment it is executing the current instruction, performing the doing. This simultaneous action is fundamental to pipeline efficiency. L1 data cache, L1D. This holds the operands, the actual ingredients or numbers the instructions need to crunch. This split architecture is vital. It eliminates contention that L1I and L1D can operate in parallel, enabling a process called the Harvard architecture principle, allowing the CPU to execute, fetch the next instruction, and retrieve the required data all in the same clock cycle. It's the ultimate choreography of speed. The sheer speed of L1 is achieved, in part, by its low associativity. Associativity is a complex term that simply means how many places a piece of data can reside within the cache. A low associativity, for example, 4-way, means the system can find the data fast because it doesn't have many places to look. However, it also means it is more prone to evicting useful data early because space is so limited. But the most profound role of L1 is in establishing a loop of absolute efficiency. Every time the CPU needs a piece of information, L1 is the first and fastest gate. If it's a hit, the core continues uninterrupted, completing billions of calculations. If it's a miss, the penalty is immediately paid as the request is passed down to the next level. The constant, brutal winnowing that determines what tiny sliver of data gets to occupy this precious microscopic space is what keeps the modern chip operating at peak performance. L1 is the engine of the now, the memory of the immediate second, the scratch pad of the digital moment. When a request inevitably misses the tiny, lightning-fast L1, it immediately pivots to the second line of defense, the level 2 cache, L2. L2 is often the quiet workhorse of the entire cache hierarchy, a layer that embodies the crucial balance between speed and size. If L1 is the core's short-term, split-second consciousness, L2 is its highly competent, highly reliable personal executive assistant. L2 is significantly larger than L1, often measured in hundreds of kilobytes, up to several megabytes, MB. This increase in size comes with a slight but acceptable increase in latency. Accessing L2 might take a few clock cycles, but this is still a fraction of the 100-cycle penalty of going to main memory. The critical architectural difference from L1 is that L2 is typically unified. It does not discriminate between instructions and data. It stores both in a common pool. This unified approach offers greater flexibility, allowing the cache to dynamically allocate its space based on the workload. If the CPU is running a code-heavy application, L2 will hold more instructions. If it's crunching massive datasets, it will prioritize data. Furthermore, L2 is almost always dedicated to a single processing core. In a multi-core CPU, each core has its own private L1 and its own private L2. This personalization is key for maintaining high core-to-cache bandwidth and minimizing congestion. It allows each core to maintain its own independent, high-speed working set of data, optimizing its individual workflow without having to compete with its neighbors. L2 also features a higher associativity than L1 because it is larger. The architects can afford a slightly longer search time, more places to look in exchange for a much lower chance of data conflict. This higher associativity makes L2 a more robust reservoir of data, holding a more comprehensive snapshot of the core's current needs. Most importantly, L2 plays a vital role in data promotion. If L1 and L2 manage the needs of the individual core, the level 3 cache, L3, is where the collective intelligence of the entire processor comes into play. The introduction of L3 marks the shift from private optimization to shared resource management. The L3 cache is often a massive sprawling reservoir compared to the lower levels, typically measured in megabytes, and sometimes stretching into tens or even hundreds of MBs in high-end server-class processors. Its sheer size allows it to capture a much broader, persistent working set of data for all the cores. Its defining feature is that it is shared across all the cores on the chip. Imagine a large corporation housed in a single building. Each core, L1, L2, is a specialized team on its own floor with its own files. But there are crucial documents, the company policy, the central database, the core operating procedures that every team needs. Duplicating these documents across 8 different team offices, L2s, is wasteful, confusing, and prone to error. L3 acts as the central, unified, highly efficient corporate town square or central library. The benefits of this shared model are enormous. Redundancy reduction. L3 ensures that a common piece of data, such as the operating system kernel or a globally shared variable in a multi-threaded program, only needs to be fetched once from the slow main memory. Once in L3, any core can access it quickly, eliminating redundant and time-consuming memory fetches. Multi-core efficiency. This is the glue that allows multiple cores to work together seamlessly on a single problem. If Core 1 writes a change to a shared variable, Core 2 can instantly see the updated value in L3, rather than having to wait for Core 1's change to be written all the way back to main memory and then reread. This is the first step toward cache coherence, which we will explore later. Physical architecture. The L3 often wraps around the cores in a physical ring or high-speed interconnect fabric. This ring bus or mesh network is a crucial component, allowing data to be ferried between L3 and the individual L2s at incredible speed, turning the entire processor into a cohesive, high-speed system. Because L3 is searched far less frequently than L1 or L2, it only receives requests that have missed both the inner levels. It can tolerate a higher latency, tens of cycles. To manage its massive size efficiently, L3 utilizes very high associativity, sometimes 16-way or more. This allows the memory management unit to have many places to store data, ensuring minimal data conflict and maximum flexibility in holding a large, communal data set. L3 is the ultimate safety net. The communal knowledge base that elevates the performance of a multi-core processor from a collection of individuals to a truly unified super engine. The cache story is primarily a three-level narrative, L1, L2, L3. But for the most demanding workloads, the outliers that break the traditional performance, model a rare and fascinating fourth chapter sometimes appears, the Level 4 cache, L4. L4 is not a standard feature. It is a specialized strategic component reserved for high-end systems with unique requirements, often acting as a high-speed system-level buffer outside the main cache hierarchy. It is the architectural equivalent of a special operations unit, deployed only when the performance requirements are extreme and the conventional layers are insufficient. The critical distinction for L4 is its location and material. L1, L2, and L3 are typically built from SRAM and live on the processor die, on chip. L4 is often an off-die buffer, meaning it exists on the same package as the CPU but is a separate physical chip, frequently built using EDRM, embedded DRAM. EDRM is slower than SRAM but significantly faster, smaller, and denser than traditional main memory DRAM. This allows L4 to be massive, often measured in hundreds of megabytes, for example, 128 megabytes. Why is this extended layer necessary? The most famous real-world example comes from Intel's Broadwell chips, where the L4 was marketed as a system-level cache called EDRM. Its primary benefits were twofold. Integrated graphics acceleration. The GPU component of the processor is inherently memory-hungry, requiring massive, sustained bandwidth. By routing the GPU's memory requests through the huge, fast L4 cache, the system dramatically reduces the need to access slow main memory. This transforms the integrated graphics performance from marginal to highly capable. Server and HPC workloads. In data centers and high-performance computing, HPC, where multi-socket CPUs are dealing with enormous datasets, a massive dedicated last-level cache, LLC, becomes the bottleneck. An L4, especially one built for server-class architectures, can act as a massive shared victim cache or system memory cache, drastically reducing memory latency and improving inter-socket communication efficiency. L4 represents the ultimate escalation in the war against latency. It is the architect's acknowledgement that for specific, memory-intensive workloads, especially those involving a powerful integrated GPU or complex multi-socket server fabrics, the L3 simply runs out of capacity. It allows the entire system, not just the cores, to benefit from a tremendous pool of fast memory, turning the entire CPU-GPU package into an unbelievably capable integrated supersystem. It is proof that sometimes the only way to beat a problem is with an even bigger, faster buffer. To understand the genius of the cache hierarchy, we must follow the journey of a single, crucial piece of data, a simple request for a number, as it travels from the mind of the CPU. This is the cinematic, step-by-step flow that defines every moment of computation. The journey begins in the execution unit of the CPU core. The instruction needs a piece of data. The clock ticks. The system must find it now. The L1 checkpoint, the instant test. The request is first sent to the L1 data cache, L1D. The core checks the L1, tags the directory of what it holds. Scenario A, L1 hit. The data is found. The instruction completes in the next clock cycle. Triumph. The system continues its billion operation stride. Scenario B, L1 miss. The data is not there. Immediate failure, but no panic. The request is instantly passed to the next level. The L2 inspection, the core's private backup. The request now checks the core's private L2 cache. The L2 is larger and slower, but still vastly preferable to going off-chip. L2 hit. Success. The data is retrieved in a few cycles. Crucially, as the data is sent to the core, a copy, the cache block, is also sent back up to the L1D, refill and promotion. The system learns and optimizes its L1 for the next attempt. L2 miss. Failure. The request has exhausted the core's private, personalized memory. It must now venture into the shared space. The L3 last resort, the communal search. The request moves to the massive, Shared L3 cache. This is the last and slowest on-chip defense. L3 hit. Success. The data is retrieved in tens of cycles. L3 miss. The moment of true dread. The request has failed every on-chip defense. The system must leave the confines of the silicon. The DRAM chasm. The 100-cycle penalty. The request is now sent across the slow, power-hungry front-side bus to the main DRAM memory. The CPU must stall a hundreds of cycles wait. DRAM fetch. The data is finally retrieved. The entire cache block, often 64 bytes of data, is then hauled back. The system is built on spatial locality, the assumption that if you ask for address X, you'll soon ask for X plus 1, X plus 2, etc. By fetching a whole block, the system pre-stages the anticipated data. This data block is written into L3, then L2, and finally into L1, completely refilling the hierarchy and increasing the system's hit rate for future requests. This entire flow, this desperate search and efficient refill, is governed by the principle of locality. The architecture is an intelligent gamble. Because of temporal locality, reusing data, and spatial locality, using nearby data, the vast majority of requests are caught by L1 or L2. This constant, micro-level optimization is what gives the CPU its phenomenal apparent speed and coherence. Once the hierarchy is established and the data flow is understood, a new and complex question arises for the chip architects. How should the data and the different cache levels relate to each other? This is the realm of inclusion policies, the governance rules that dictate data management between L1, L2, and L3. This isn't just an academic detail. The chosen policy has a profound impact on complexity, space efficiency, and most critically, cache coherence in multi-core systems. There are three primary models of cache diplomacy. 1. Inclusive caches, the duplicators. The rule: if a block of data exists in a higher-level cache L1, it must also exist in the next-level cache L2, L3. Analogy: imagine a boss L1 has a copy of a file. The next-level manager, L2, is required to keep an identical backup copy. Strengths: this design greatly simplifies snooping and coherence. If the system needs to check if a piece of data is present anywhere in a core's private caches, L1 and L2, it only needs to check the L2, since the L2 contains the L1's content. Invalidating stale data becomes very simple. You just invalidate the L2 entry, and you know the L1 entry is also guaranteed to be gone, or will be invalidated upon next L2 access. Drawbacks: space inefficiency. Duplicating data wastes precious on-chip SRAM space. The total effective cache space is dictated by the size of the largest, deepest inclusive level, L3. 2. Exclusive caches. The specialists. The rule: a block of data can exist in only one level of the cache hierarchy at a time. The contents of L1 and L2 are mutually exclusive. They hold unique, non-overlapping data blocks. Analogy: the data is a precious artifact. It is either held in the smallest display case, L1, or the slightly larger one, L2, but never both. Strengths: space efficiency. This system makes the most of the limited SRAM. The effective cache size is the sum of L1 plus L2 plus L3, maximizing the amount of unique data that can be held on the chip. Drawbacks: complexity. Management and coherence become much harder. When a piece of data is moved from L2 to L1, a promotion, it must be removed from L2, adding an extra step. To check if a block exists, the system must check L1 and L2, making the process of maintaining coherence, snooping, significantly more complex and slower. 3. Non-inclusive, non-exclusive. 9. The pragmatists. The rule: data in the inner caches, L1, L2, may or may not be in the outer cache, L3. There is no strict rule of duplication or exclusion. Analogy: this is the hybrid model, the best of both worlds approach favored by many modern architectures, like Intel's. It allows the system to make smart, dynamic choices based on the situation. Strengths: offers the flexibility to optimize for both space and coherence management, allowing architects to choose specific eviction policies that balance the needs of the system without being bound by a rigid rule. The choice of inclusion policy is one of the deepest philosophical debates in processor design. It is a fundamental commitment to a trade-off. Do you prioritize the simplicity and robustness of coherence, inclusive, or the sheer amount of fast storage, exclusive? This decision directly shapes the performance and complexity of the entire chip. We arrive at the final highest-stakes segment of the cache story, cache coherence. This concept is not merely a detail. It is the central pillar upon which the stability of multi-core computing rests. The advent of multi-core processor CPUs with 8 or 64 independent brains created what we call the digital paradox. Multiple processing units are accessing the same shared memory regions simultaneously. Imagine Core 1 reads the variable x and finds its value is 5. It holds that value in its private L1 cache. Meanwhile, Core 2 updates the value of x to 10 and writes this new value into its private L1 cache and the shared L3 cache. Now Core 1 needs x again. If it pulls the value from its own L1, it retrieves 5 the old stale data. Core 2 gets 10. The two fastest minds on Earth have fundamentally different views of reality. The system collapses. This is the crisis of incoherence. Cache coherence is the set of protocols like the famous Muse protocol that guarantees that whenever any core reads a memory address, it always receives the most recently written value regardless of which core wrote it or where the data currently resides in the cache hierarchy. This is where the inclusion policies from the previous section become the critical infrastructure. Inclusive policies make coherence easier. Because the shared L3 is guaranteed to contain a directory of everything in all the L1, L2s. When Core 2 changes a value, the L3 knows exactly which other core is L2, and thus L1 has a stale copy. It can simply send an invalidate message to the entire core's L2, flushing the stale data, without having to check every tiny L1 individually. It simplifies the central control, trading space for a cleaner process. Exclusive policies make coherence harder. The shared L3 doesn't know what's an L1 and L2 separately, forcing more complex snooping. Protocols where the cores must constantly listen to the system bus to see if their neighbors are accessing or modifying data they currently hold. The constant, instantaneous synchronization of data across dozens of private and shared caches is the most complex logistical act a CPU performs. It's the assurance that all actors are reading from the same script, that all players are operating on the same factual reality. Coherence is the integrity of the entire system. The CPU cache, this complex, layered, and ruthlessly optimized system, offers a profound lesson that extends far beyond the silicon. The efficiency of a system is not determined by its fastest component, but by how well it manages its delays. The L1 lesson. Prioritization. Life is full of latency. We cannot access all knowledge instantly. The L1 teaches us to identify our single most critical high-frequency task and keep the tools for that task within immediate reach. What is your L1 today? What is the one thing you must do that, if interrupted, causes the biggest stall? Protect that core focus. The L3 lesson. Shared knowledge. The shared L3 exists to prevent redundant fetching. In life and business, how often do teams or individuals duplicate work because they lack a central, accessible, shared knowledge base? A true leader designs systems, like L3, that promote communal efficiency, where one person's effort becomes another person's instant resource. The coherence lesson. Integrity. The fundamental purpose of the entire architecture is to maintain coherence, to ensure everyone operates on the same reality. In personal relationships, in professional teams, and in society, incoherence acting on stale, outdated, or conflicting information leads to system breakdown, argument, and paralysis. We must build and maintain communication systems that ensure the most recently written value of truth, fact, or agreement is always the one that guides our actions. The CPU cache is not just a technology. It is a philosophy of perfect tiered resource management. It teaches us that true power comes not from limitless speed, but from the intelligent, anticipatory reduction of wait time. It is the story of how a small, expensive investment in proximity can unleash the boundless potential of the whole. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the hidden world of silicon architecture. Now, let's keep the conversation coherent. If you were the chief architect of a new chip designed for creativity, would you prioritize an inclusive, simpler, robust coherence for collaboration, or an exclusive maximum memory capacity for individual intensive processing, cache policy, and why? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Remember to hit that subscribe button, your L1 cache for tech knowledge, so you never miss a critical update. Wishing you and your personal processing core great health and peak performance.